The sound of the door crashing open rattled the windows and sent a jolt down my spine. Papers flew, coffee spilled across my sketches. And before I could rise from my chair, Sandra Whitmore stormed into my cabin as though she were leading a SWAT raid. Behind her trailed three men in dark jackets, her so-called security team, though I recognized two of them from the hardware store. Sandra's voice cut through the autumn air like a siren. She screamed at me to leave immediately, waving her clipboard like a weapon. I didn't move. My pulse raced, but I stayed calm because I had been waiting for this exact moment. The recorder hidden under a stack of my daughter's drawings had been blinking red for 3 days, quietly gathering everything I needed. I glanced across the table at the woman in the navy coat, her presence steady and deliberate, her eyes fixed on Sandra with professional detachment. She was no ordinary visitor. She was Governor Sarah Mitchell, though Sandra hadn't realized it yet. Sandra's tirade faltered when her eyes flicked to the corner of the room, where the corner of a covered canvas peeked out from beneath a drop cloth. She froze, recognition flashing across her face. That painting, a Harrison original from 1847, had been in my family for 4 generations, passed down like a sacred relic. And Sandra's greed was written all over her expression. This was never about HOA regulations. It was about theft, dressed up in rules and threats. The guards shifted uneasily, realizing this wasn't what they'd signed up for. The air grew heavier. I could almost hear Sandra's mind racing as the governor finally spoke, her voice calm, sharp, deadly precise. Miss Whitmore, I presume? I'm Governor Sarah Mitchell. Perhaps you'd like to explain why you've just broken into a private residence currently under state heritage review. Silence. Sandra's face drained of color. Her clipboard trembled. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt the power shift. The trap was springing shut. 3 days earlier, the harassment had reached its peak. Fines of $500 a day, false violation notices, and threats to call Child Protective Services because my daughter supposedly lived in an unsafe house. I'd seen enough petty legal intimidation during my years as a lawyer to know what I was dealing with. But Sandra's obsession went further. She wasn't just harassing us, she was circling prey. My 8-year-old daughter, Lily, asked me why the mean lady hated us. I didn't have an answer that would make sense to a child waiting for heart surgery, but I swore to myself then that I would not let Sandra break us. That same day, I got a call from the State Heritage Preservation Office. They'd heard whispers about Maple Serenity, about an HOA president abusing her power to target historically significant properties. They wanted to investigate. For the first time in weeks, I felt hope. The next morning, my neighbor Frank Morrison showed up with a folder thick enough to choke a horse. Inside were documents Sandra never intended anyone to see, minutes from secret meetings, forged environmental reports signed by a consultant who'd been dead 8 months, and evidence she'd been running the HOA like a personal racket. Frank had seen it before. Officials who think power makes them untouchable. But even he was shocked at the scale of Sandra's scheme. She had already targeted other families, forced them into desperate relocations, and walked away with their heirlooms. And now, she wanted mine. So I set the trap. I created a Facebook group, exposing Sandra's forged documents, and the community responded with outrage. Neighbors who'd kept silent came forward with their own stories, missing heirlooms, false violations, threats that vanished once they cooperated. Sandra tried to regain control with glossy flyers and threats, but it was too late. She'd woken up a community that no longer feared her. Her biggest mistake came during an HOA meeting she called on short notice. She stood before the crowd, waving papers about safety violations and hidden assets. But before she could finish, Frank played a recording of her phone call with an auction house. On it, Sandra's voice gleefully described how she'd force my family out and extract a Harrison painting from the cabin. The silence that followed was devastating. One by one, residents rose and told their stories. The mask was off. What Sandra didn't expect was Lily. My daughter had taken her tablet and, in her childlike way, started a live stream called "Mean Lady Trying to Steal Our House." In her innocent voice, she explained that her dad just wanted to finish his book so he could pay for her heart surgery. She showed the letters, the machines that kept her breathing at night, the drawings she loved. Within hours, tens of thousands of people were watching. By morning, hundreds of thousands. Donations poured in. Our fight had gone viral, and Sandra's name was suddenly toxic. The day Governor Mitchell arrived at my cabin for the official heritage assessment, the air was charged with anticipation. Cameras from the local news crew rolled as she examined the cabin's timber, the stone foundation, and finally, the Harrison painting. "This piece alone justifies heritage protection for the entire property," she said, her voice carrying both awe and finality. Relief flooded through me. Protection was within reach. That's when I heard the engines outside. Sandra returned, flanked by her hired guards and dragging along a different news crew she'd managed to enlist. She burst through the door, waving fraudulent documents, declaring she was executing emergency HOA authority to seize the property. Her voice cracked with desperation. And then came the killing blow. Governor Mitchell didn't raise her voice. She simply looked Sandra in the eye and said, "Miss Whitmore, perhaps you'd like to explain why you've just attempted theft of protected cultural property in front of the governor of Michigan and multiple news organizations." Sandra's bravado crumbled. The guards stepped back, realizing they'd been duped into participating in a crime. And then Marcus Webb, the investigator Sandra herself had hired, stepped forward. He introduced himself as a special investigator working with the Attorney General's office. He'd been recording every conversation, every fraudulent scheme, every desperate move Sandra had made. The charges, fraud, conspiracy, attempted theft, abuse of office, rolled out like a death sentence. Sandra's arrest was swift. Handcuffed, pale, she shouted at me that this wasn't over, but her words rang hollow. For months, she had terrorized us, and now she was being destroyed by the very system she thought she could manipulate. The aftermath unfolded quickly. Sandra went to prison, ordered to repay the families she'd defrauded. A new state law was passed to prevent HOA abuse, inspired by our case. My cabin became the Helen Callaway Heritage Center, named for my mother, who had once taught Governor Mitchell the value of preserving history. The Harrison painting, once nearly stolen, became a symbol of resistance and survival. But the real miracle came with Lily. The attention her live stream generated brought donations and medical opportunities we never could have afforded. The University of Michigan offered her an experimental surgery, fully covered by research funding. She survived. She thrived. Watching her laugh by the lake after her recovery, I knew Sandra's cruelty had backfired in the most perfect way imaginable. I rebuilt my life piece by piece, turning my legal skills into advocacy for families like ours, writing a guide for homeowners, speaking to communities about their rights. Maple Serenity, once poisoned by fear, became a model of transparency and resilience. Sometimes I sit on the deck at sunset, the lake reflecting the light as it always has, and think about how close we came to losing everything. Sandra Whitmore wanted to take my family's legacy, but instead she gave us something greater: protection, community, and the kind of justice that ripples outward. In the end, the lesson was simple. Power built on fear collapses, but patience, preparation, and truth, those are weapons no bully can survive.